Okay. So today's talk is pseudo-historical. We can agree on that. So I'm going to talk about, this is an ancient pathway that's been, I'll discuss it a bit further, but it's basically the Hudson Bay used an ancient pathway to move their goods back and forth between Hope and Tulameen near Princeton, down in the interior, the west interior of the plateau. So I'll just be talking about that, and this was a project I was hired to do for an NGO, Hope Mountain Center in Hope, BC, aptly named, just like my company. And okay, let's go on. We'll just talk about that. Just click and it goes. And so we'll just talk about the project. I'm going to give you a little history lesson. So it's 100 years, 170 years of history around that trail as a Hudson Bay asset, whatever you want to call it. And then we're going to talk about how I put all that information into a map, talking about the map design, and then we'll get to questions, hopefully. So that's me. I'm Jeff. I'm the principal. That sounds big poobah guy. I'm the lead and only cartographer, accidental as well. So I do cartographic design. I take out the trash. I do everything. So I'm a one-man show that makes maps. I publish maps as well and retail them through. I wholesale them to places like Mountain Equipment Co-op and distribute. And I also I'm part of another company, and I do GIS consulting. That's my real daytime job. Cartography is something that I do late at night and on weekends because I love it. So 170 years of history, and this pictograph on the left is a pictograph that was found nearby the trail, and it's a bear paw. So these two pieces were juxtaposed. This is by the Hope Mountain Center to represent the trail and to keep the First Nations aspect to the colonial aspect. It's kind of jarring, but that's the Hudson Bay for you. So Hudson Bay, everybody knows Hudson Bay, right? Was English, was Canadian. I don't even know if it's American now. What's that?
It is indeed.
It is. It's owned by, it's controlled by American interests now. Then that's very Canadian. So incorporated in the 1600s, and this is really incredible. When I was going through this, finding out that they once owned 15% of the land mass of North America at the time. Extremely powerful in controlling the fur trade at the time. And so international politics at the time, so we get our 49th parallel as the boundary between Canada and the US. And at that point, there becomes a problem because we used to trade HEC used to trade down Fort Vancouver down in Washington State. So we have the two Vancouvers. So they used to trade down there. With the advent of the 49th parallel, boom, that's cut off. So they have to find an alternate route to get to the coast. So that's where this came along. This trail was relocated based on that historical network that was created back then. And this is the area we're talking about, okay? So originally, traditional territories, 3 nations in that area, and they used this pathway as for trading, for hunting, moving back and forth to the coast, because it's very rich going from one place to the other in terms of the geographies and the landscape. So it was basically a highway at the time. It was a rough one, but it was the best way to get to the coast, to the Fraser Valley. And the character, black guy, he was a Similkameen chief. And he was one of the originals that showed this trail to British, I think it was a Royal Engineer, part of the Royal Engineers, Anderson, back in 1846. And this is a map. It's an old map. It's blanched out, so it's hard to see. It's not just the screen, but you can see some areas up here that are yellow. This is the river up here. And this yellow part was impassable, which made them cross the land. They had no option. They couldn't get their canoes or anything through there, or the horses. So that was, as it says here, the inspiration for for that. Now, it's quite the story behind how they made it. And literally in 9 months, this guy, Henry Peters, a surveyor, him and a few men, they bang out the trail. They build trading posts at Fort Hope and in Kamloops. They did all this in 9 months, which is absolutely stunning. Once you ever traverse this country, it's unforgiving. Mm-hmm. And so for the next decade, based on their works, their efforts, they have a trading area, a trading express, HBC Express essentially, where all the goods, and even all of HBC's ledgers and books and gold and all this stuff is flying back and forth along this route with horseback trail. So very, very well used. And then, as you can see here, later on it's just used because other things progress, other better routes were surveyed and found at the time this discovery was ongoing. And so here we get to how the trail is being refound and relocated. So named back in, I think this is Hatfield here, so Harley Hatfield. I guess at the time he was quite the character, and he started this rejuvenation of the trail, so locating pieces and parts as they went along, him and his family. And so have a good look at him. Now have a good look at his family. You can pick them up, right? You can tell who's the grandfather. It's quite fun. So this family was pretty much responsible for getting things going on this trail. And they worked on it through the 60s and the 70s. And eventually, so in 2016, the trail opens based on their efforts and the Hope Mountain Center. And these are folks that are hard at it, creating today's standard of trail grade bridges and passes and campsites, etc. So chainsaw is required. And these are the standard mile posts or kilometer posts along the route. So this is what I do. So much of the talk today, or the talks over the last couple of days, have all talked about data. That's a common theme to me. It's historical, of course, but everything through there is data that weaves its way through, and this is no different. But I'm just going to get a bit more into the nuts and bolts about how I use data to create my maps. So a bit more of a practical, less academic. So just so you're ready. So as many people do in this field, we use whatever we've got as tools to get things going. I have ArcGIS because in my consulting business, we need copies of all kinds of tools to help our customers based on what they have. So I end up using that. I'm used to it, but I use GDAL quite a bit for the raster, vector projections, all kinds of things. Natural Scene Designer, excellent tool. I think, Chris, you are one of those guys. Illustrator and Photoshop, of course, InDesign for pulling things together. And this wacky flow diagram on the right is basically what I do, and I think most people are similar. Along the way, you have different things that iterate. You stand there spinning, going, I don't know how to do this, or you get stuck, so you just iterate and then move on finally when you pop out with something that you like. So that's essentially it, and I'll just go through really quickly how this works. So essentially, like all projects, we have an idea, or the client has an idea. It works both ways. Then we do research, we find data, and we start putting things together. And that's the exciting part of the project. It's the shiny object. So we go hard at that. I enjoy that part because you're discovering new things as you go. And the Hope Mountain Center, the big push for them was to culminate all the work that they've done with this map that represents the work, the history, the area, the trail, and the landscape, which is important because it's a varying landscape. It's interesting, and it needs to be represented appropriately. So we're focusing on trail, regional heritage, especially the character of the landscape, and we're going to try and bring in some visual clarity so that it makes sense and we're not cluttered up visually. So here we are. So I couldn't resist this. Is there any hope? Yes. Just east of Vancouver. True. No laughs. Okay. So fairly large area. So Hope to Princeton is it's a pretty big chunk. Manning Park is directly below that where the A and the D of Canada is. That's the North Manning Park. And just below that in the States, that's the Cascades. So you can see that we're extension of the northern Cascades is where this starts. So Hope down here in the Cascades, traversing, that's about a 74-kilometer trail up to Tuolumne, and that links up with the Kettle Valley railway bed that's there now, which used to be, of course, a historic railway that carried goods to the coast. And so from that Landsat, I mean, this is the final product, low res, but this is what I'm going to describe how I created this thing. All right, so part of this, as I said earlier, we're trying to create historical awareness of the place, and what I'm not showing you is the verso of the map, which contains additional information that was put together by the Hope Mountain Center to support this. My job was just to get the map, but of course, we're working together on content for both sides. And you see, I'll go through here. We'll try to show you how I characterize the landscape and how I produced some of the clarity in the map that hopefully will hold interest and is visually appealing. So this term is, I heard it from Dave Imus, who's a cartographer. Anybody know David Imus? Yeah. The American down in Oregon. Fantastic, only the basics guy. I really like his stuff. So he coined this term geographically expressive, which I think is a really good term for what I was trying to do. And I had lots of talks with Dave over the months, and basically this characterizes what geographically expressive means in the sense of cartography. So this is what you're trying to achieve, and this is how you do it. So it's essentially what we're trying to do with all maps, is trying to communicate something. We're trying to produce some kind of geographical awareness of the area, get it to be visually clear, and then give you context of what the theme is. So through lots of courses, it's going to be visual. That's how your brain classifies things. So visual separation, hierarchy, and harmony at the same time. So sometimes this sounds counterproductive, but there's ways to do this. And of course, the characterization of the land, which is usually done through some kind of a natural color background, so it's not jarring to you. You don't have mountains or the Geomatics color, the color of Chardonnay at sunset, whatever that is. Very strange. So processing steps. We've got, again, standard. It's about data. We're going to get data, and everyone has mentioned just integrating data into your project is usually it's a speed bump. There's always speed bumps. It's never the right. It's never it's always in some format that's difficult to work with, or there's something that has too many duplicates because it's overlaid, etc. So I don't have to explain that to you guys. You guys know about that. And there's many tools that we all use to hammer that stuff into shape. Beat it to fit and paint it to match, right? So data trails, tons of trails, and I think I've got, as we go through here, these are essentially the basic layers that we would mostly include in any kind of trail map or backcountry map. These are the basic layers. And so I'll just run through here. These are visually, you can see that's the trail itself, and then we get on to hydrography. Then we get on to some of the park cultural features. And so obviously I'm slowly building up the layers that are a result of compilation of many other data sets. This is the Forest Service roads. Yeah, kind of like the seismic lines, right? Mm-hmm. But curly. And then trails, so some of them popped up in between. Lots of trails are based on old forestry roads as well. So this just gives you, it's not just a little trail that's going through a bunch of mountains. There's all kinds of uses to this area. And hunters use this area, skiers use this area, walkers, horse people use these trails and roads. Logging trucks use these roads. So it's quite a busy area. Not turned into quite a patchwork yet, but there's active forestry going on along here, and mining down over there south of Princeton. The top park up there is the Hopala Park. Thank you. And that's the annotation as the final layer that we're going everybody has fun doing it. Yeah. Just words, right? Okay, and then so we go through this, we process all that, and then the next thing we do is we create a raster background which everybody throws under their maps. I use SRTM data, the Space Shuttle radar elevation data, and process that to get a shaded relief. Next thing we do is we add a texture layer. Now, anyone heard of, what's his name, Leyland Brown? Yes, you would, yeah. Yeah, and so he has this texture mapping, which is based on the change, rate of change to get to a peak. So a peak would highlight as white, and a flat base of a valley would highlight as darker, would be shadowed. So you put these two together with the elevation data, and you get a bit more of a feel for the landscape. So the rivers start to pop out. Lots of features that probably weren't that apparent before start to pop out. And then I'll take a Landsat or whatever's appropriate. Usually Landsat based on the scale of maps, 50,000 plus. Landsat will work, and I generate the ground cover. So I'm essentially, trees, alpine, just basic categories of land use. And I do that through a false image satellite scene. So I do specific bands for false color, which emphasizes the vegetation and rock and water. So they literally just pop out, split them up, go into Photoshop, and then start to recombine with different colors. And then you get that. Okay? So this part here, so this transitional landscape, so we're going from the coast mountains, which is very dark, dingy, and wet. Then we go across the Hudson plateau that gets to Princeton, where it's higher, it's drier. I think 1.7 meters of rain in Hope, 1.2 in Princeton, so it's significant. So as you're traversing from west to east, you're getting drier and drier and more open forest, so it changes quite radically. So all the hard hiking is around Hope, and it gets easier and open, and swimmable lakes and all kinds of things as you go east. So what I did here, just to show that it's hard to see when you're looking at it at the map, but if I created a gradient across, so a darker blue on the west over the coastal mountains to a lighter shade, or no blue at all. So what it does, let's see if it actually happens. Okay, so that's, yeah, that was with and without. That wasn't too good on this screen, sure. Now everything gets combined, and boom, you get a raster plus vector, and then you get a map. And that's essentially, this is the final product. So what we've got is, the layout. They wanted to include the access points. There's this tiny little green line up at the top and a green box at the top. These are highway exit numbers. These are access points to get to logging roads that get you to the trail. So that's why we have this extent. I'm not a big fan of inset maps. Kind of breaks it up. So this was a good opportunity to include the Kettle Valley Railway, which in purplish color that goes all the way up through Cultaholic. We get to include the park. That's a well-used park, so we've got trails in there. So this tends to be now becomes not only the HBC trail, but a multi-use map that whoever's in the area can use. You don't have to necessarily be on the park to do that. And you also have connections into the north end of Manning Park, which is another map I've done. So I won't go through these. These are elements, and I have a map here that you guys can look at later. But essentially, these are the elements that I've put on and strive to create clarity around how it's labeled. So we've got kilometer markings in white dots along the trail. The trail obviously stands out really well. We've got simple contour lines. We've got junction markers, those little white boxes, and then of course the standard signs for camping and such. Let's go on to the next one here. Kettle Valley Railway, simplified. It's just a set of dots because it's important, but not as important as the trail, so it becomes a bit more of a background element. So I'm done. Okay. All right. All right, let's go. That's it, done.